You can cross an ocean on almost anything. That's technically true. But if your budget is capped at $100,000, the real question is different. What sailboat actually gives you the best chance of getting across safely without turning the project into a money pit? Because offshore, the purchase price is only the beginning. A cheap boat with bad chain plates, tired rigging, old tanks, and a mystery bottom job is not a bargain. It's a refit bill, pretending to be a dream. This list is about 7 sailboats with real offshore credibility that can still make sense under $100,000, not just to buy, but to actually prepare. A lot of boats sell under 100 grand. Far fewer can be bought, fixed, equipped, and trusted offshore under that same number. That's why classic fiberglass from the 70s and 80s still dominates this category. Thick laminates, conservative rigs, serious ballast, hulls designed to survive real weather instead of maximizing marina volume. These boats are not perfect. Some are slow, some are cramped. Some have known weak points you absolutely have to inspect. But the best ones offer something modern boats in this price range usually don't. Real offshore logic and construction standards that were absurdly robust by today's standards. Number 7 is the Alban Vega 27. The Vega looks too small to belong here. That's exactly why it does. This 27-footer with modest dimensions somehow built a global reputation by crossing oceans repeatedly. The Vega has sailed to the Arctic, the Antarctic, and around the world more times than many much larger boats. That only happens when a design gets the fundamentals right. Ballast ratio around 40%. Displacement to length ratio about 290. That gives the boat real offshore seriousness for its size. Deck-stepped mast, modified long keel, keel-mounted rudder. Simple, honest, easy to understand. Offshore, simplicity has real value because every unnecessary complication becomes one more failure point 1,000 miles from land. The Vega's other superpower is economics. A lot of these boats still sell for $15,000 to $25,000. That changes everything. The smartest strategy is not stretching for the biggest hull you can afford. It's buying a real little ocean boat and refitting it properly. New diesel, fresh wiring, modern safety gear, new standing rigging, wind vane or autopilot, updated communications. On a Vega, that no-compromise refit is still financially possible inside your overall budget. You could spend $30,000 on the boat and refit and still have $70,000 in reserve for provisioning, insurance, and the unexpected. No other boat on this list gives you that kind of financial margin. Margin is not luxury. Margin is the difference between a voyage that works and one that stalls halfway because the money ran out. The trade-off is space. This is not a boat for people who want floating condo comfort. Everything aboard has to justify its existence. But that's also why the Vega works. It forces efficiency. And efficient boats are often safer boats because they're easier to inspect, maintain, and keep in trim. Number 6 is the Contessa 32. The Contessa can look too narrow, too small, too cramped to carry the reputation it carries. Then the weather turns ugly and suddenly the design starts making sense. The Contessa 32 earned its legend in the most convincing way possible. During the 1979 Fastnet disaster, while larger yachts were abandoned, the Contessa 32 Ascent was the only boat in its class to finish. That's not branding, that's offshore credibility under public pressure. Forced 10 wins, extreme seas, 15 fatalities. In that context, a 32-footer not only surviving but finishing tells you everything about what the designer prioritized. Narrow beam at 9 feet 5 inches, high ballast ratio at 47%, displacement to length ratio around 297. The result is a boat that's difficult to knock down, powerful upwind, and deeply trustworthy in heavy weather. This is not a boat built around interior volume. Headroom is only 5 feet 10 inches. Space is limited. But that trade makes sense because beam is not automatically safety. Sometimes it's the opposite. The Contessa gets its security from proportions and balance, not from optimistic stability numbers. Older Contessa 32s often land between $35,000 and $65,000. That leaves enough room for the refit work that really matters. For a solo sailor or disciplined couple, the Contessa 32 is one of the most confidence-inspiring boats you can buy at this price. Number 5 is the Cape Dory 36. The Cape Dory 36 is what happens when classic offshore design gets refined for cruising without losing its core integrity. Long overhangs, full keel with attached rudder, heavy displacement, steady motion. Built from 1978 to 1990, it's a modified version of the Alberg 37 racing design, adapted for real passage making. Draft was reduced, beam increased, more ballast was added. That created a serious offshore boat. Displacement to length ratio around 365, comfort ratio around 35.7. Those are real blue water numbers. This boat settles into a seaway instead of fighting every wave with frantic motion. Crew fatigue is not just comfort. Fatigue causes mistakes. Mistakes offshore become damage, injury, or bad decisions. The usual criticism is light air performance, which is fair. This is not a boat that loves drifting. But in steady offshore breeze, the whole design wakes up. It becomes a powerful, comfortable tracker. The interior is an offshore layout where practical use and secure movement matter more than open-plan living. With 166 built, they're reasonably available in North America, and prices often fall between $50,000 and $85,000. You can buy a real offshore boat with enough volume for long-distance use and still keep money available for the gear and repairs that actually matter. Number 4 is the Tiana 37. The Tiana 37 looks exactly like what people imagine when they picture an ocean voyager. Double-ended stern, heavy displacement, beautiful woodwork. Designed by Robert Perry and built in Taiwan, the Tiana 37 displaces around 22,500 pounds. Displacement to length ratio around 407. This is not a performance cruiser, it's a load-carrying passage home designed for long periods aboard and the kind of movement that reduces punishment offshore. The interior is why people fall in love with this boat. The teak joinery was exceptional, a feeling of solidity and permanence that most modern boats cannot match. When you're spending weeks aboard, that sense of quality matters psychologically. But this is also one of the easiest boats on this list to buy badly. The biggest trap is the original chain plate arrangement. The chain plates were encapsulated in fiberglass and plywood within the hull. Over time, water ingress leads to hidden corrosion. When chain plates fail, rigs come down. That's not cosmetic. That's the kind of failure that can end a passage. Many owners solve it by converting to external chain plates, usually at $4,000 to $6,000. That's money well spent. The decks are the other major issue. Many Tiana 37s use teak over fiberglass with thousands of screws. Thousands of fastener penetrations are exactly how older boats end up with wet cores and huge bills. Don't skip the hard questions about the deck. A moisture meter and careful survey are worth more than all the teak in Taiwan. The Tiana is not a casual purchase, it's a condition purchase. Buy one with chain plates and deck issues already handled, and it becomes one of the best traditional offshore cruisers in this range. Buy one with those problems unresolved, and your budget disappears fast. Older boats still appear between $65,000 and $95,000. Number 3 is the Westsail 32. The Westsail 32 is the icon, the boat everyone calls indestructible. And unlike a lot of legends, this one has the numbers to back it up. Double-ended stern, full keel, massive displacement. A hull built like the fiberglass industry was trying to win a war against uncertainty. The Westsail 32 displaces around 19,500 pounds on a 27.5-foot waterline. Displacement to length ratio of 419, ultra heavy. Ballast ratio 36%. Comfort ratio 42.85. This boat does not care about being lively in light air. It cares about stores, water, fuel, and composure. The construction is where the reputation comes from. The hull uses 12 alternating layers of hand-laid woven roving and chopped strand mat, resulting in solid fiberglass more than an inch thick. That's massive compared to modern production boats. If impact resilience matters to you, the Westsail starts sounding very convincing. The main weakness is the deck and cabin top, which used a half-inch plywood core that can rot if hardware hasn't been properly rebedded over the years. A bulletproof hull can still sit under a compromised deck. There's also quality variation. A lot of Westsails were sold as kits. Interior quality can vary dramatically. Factory-finished boats command more money. Poorly finished ones require major rebuilds. But because the hull itself is so fundamentally robust, even project boats can make sense for the right buyer. Someone with skills and patience can buy a rough Westsail hull for very little and build it into a legitimate ocean crosser. The Westsail is slow, no point pretending otherwise. But when people talk about a boat that can carry a world aboard and keep going, this is exactly the design they mean. Number 2 is the Barber 30. The Barber 30 is what happens when traditional offshore design gets refined into something far more elegant than it has any right to be. If the Westsail is the brick, the Barber is the sculpture. Still traditional, still serious, but with much better finesse. Designed by Robert Perry and built in Taiwan, the Barber 30 is widely considered one of the finest small offshore yachts ever built. Not just because of the craftsmanship, because Perry was trying to prove that a traditional double-ender did not have to be slow. He gave the boat an easily driven hull matched with a generous cutter rig. That combination matters because offshore speed is not vanity. It's exposure control. The shorter the passage, the fewer opportunities for gear failure and crew fatigue. Displacement to length ratio around 379. Sail area to displacement ratio about 14.97. Hull speed around 6.63 knots. It carries those numbers with more grace than most boats in this category. The structure is excellent. Solid fiberglass hull. 10 to 12 laminate layers around the keel, 4,000-pound iron ballast encapsulated in the hull. Interior teak joinery that's become legendary. The amount of quality packed into a 30-footer is almost absurd. Headroom around 6 feet 4 inches. But the Barber 30 does have two specific weak points. The original bilge-mounted mild steel fuel tanks can corrode from outside due to bilge water. This is a slow problem, but over decades it becomes real. Many owners replace them with custom aluminum or stainless tanks. A fuel tank failure offshore means contaminated fuel, potential loss of engine power, and a cleanup nobody wants in a seaway. The second issue is chain plates vulnerable to crevice corrosion. The good news is they're accessible from the interior, which makes inspection realistic. A boat you cannot inspect is a boat you cannot trust. A boat with accessible chain plates, accessible through holes, and accessible engine compartments is a boat that lets you stay ahead of problems instead of being surprised. The Barber 30 also holds its value unusually well. Typical prices run between $55,000 and $79,000. That tells you the market trusts the boat. If you want a small offshore yacht with real pedigree, refined handling, and beautiful construction, the Barber 30 is one of the strongest answers in this category. Number 1 is the Pacific Seacraft 37. The smartest sailboat to cross an ocean under $100,000 is the Pacific Seacraft 37. It wins not because it has the most dramatic story or extreme construction. It wins because it gets the most things right at the same time. Designed by Bill Kraylock and inducted into the American Sailboat Hall of Fame, the Pacific Seacraft 37 is often described as one of the most balanced offshore sailboats ever made. Balance is the key. It's not just about how the boat sits in water. It's about how every design decision supports every other one. Hull shape supports motion comfort. Motion comfort supports crew endurance. Crew endurance supports safe watches. Safe watches support good decision-making. Good decision-making supports survival. It uses a cutaway full keel and a skeg-hung rudder that gives directional stability and real sea kindliness without feeling slow or clumsy. A full keel with no cutaway tracks very well, but can be slow to tack. A fin keel is responsive, but can feel twitchy offshore. The cutaway full keel splits the difference. You get the directional stability of a longer keel with the maneuverability of a shorter one. It's a brilliant compromise. Offshore, brilliant compromises are worth more than extreme solutions. Its numbers are not extreme. Displacement to length ratio around 286. Ballast ratio around 39%. But the point is not headline numbers, it's behavior. This is a boat known for tracking beautifully and working exceptionally well with a wind vane. That matters more than many people realize. Self-steering offshore is not luxury. It's survival workload management. A boat that holds course well keeps the crew functional. On a long passage, the helmsman is not doing most of the work. The wind vane is. The crew's job is to monitor, adjust sails, navigate, cook, sleep, stay alert. If the boat tracks poorly, the self-steering overcorrects. It hunts. It loads and unloads the rig. The crew wakes up because something feels wrong. They adjust. 30 minutes later, same thing. That cycle destroys sleep, and destroyed sleep destroys crews. The Pacific Seacraft 37 breaks that cycle. It tracks so well under wind vane that many owners report leaving the cockpit for hours with total confidence. The boat just holds its line. That's not laziness. That's the foundation of sustainable offshore sailing. The construction is excellent. Solid, hand-laid fiberglass hull, encapsulated lead ballast, bronze through holes, quality hardware throughout. Pacific Seacraft had a reputation for building boats above the standard of the era, but no boat is without issues. The most common concern is standing rigging, chain plates, engine hours, and the teak decks if present. These are age-related realities that apply to every boat on this list. The difference is that on the Pacific Seacraft, the underlying structure is so sound that once you address these items, you're left with a boat that can genuinely be trusted for decades more. The downside is price. The Pacific Seacraft 37 frequently flirts with the $100,000 line. But examples from the 80s or boats with higher hours can still show up in the $65,000 to $95,000 range. If you find the right one at the right price, you're getting one of the best ocean-crossing sailboats ever built. The margin is tight. You'll need discipline about what you spend on refit versus what you spend on the boat itself. That discipline is the whole point. Here's the bigger truth. The best sub-$100,000 ocean boat is usually not the biggest boat. It's the boat with the best bones and the fewest expensive lies. A structurally honest $50,000 boat with room left for refit is often far better than a $90,000 boat that still needs everything. That's why boats like the Cape Dory 36 and Pacific Seacraft 37 are so compelling. They leave margin. Margin offshore is safety. The Westsail 32 and Tiana 37 give you old-school mass and comfort ratios that are hard to ignore. The Barber 30 and Contessa 32 prove that smaller boats can still be elite offshore machines. The Vega offers the lowest cost legitimate entry point into ocean crossing. But once you stop shopping emotionally and start shopping technically, the pattern gets clear. You don't just buy a hull, you buy standing rigging, you buy tank condition, you buy chain plates, you buy deck core integrity, you buy steering reliability, you buy self-steering compatibility, you buy the truth hidden under the brochure photos. That's what separates a blue water bargain from a blue water mistake. The winners are usually boats that combine real offshore pedigree with enough leftover budget to solve the known issues properly. That's the whole game, not what looks toughest. What still makes sense after the survey, after the yard quote, and after the first serious refit spreadsheet. Because that's when the fantasy ends and the real ocean boat reveals itself. If you've bought and prepared one of these boats on a tight budget, I want to hear what actually surprised you. What cost more than you expected? What held up better than you feared? That real-world experience is worth more than any list. And if you want more straight talk about boats that actually work for serious sailing, subscribe.